program. This week we're going to be looking at a book all about the growing wheat over the years. Starts right at the beginning of the industry and catches us up where we are at the moment. We're also going to be chatting to Tim Wilding from Tamania, and we're also going to be doing all sorts of things regarding federated farmers with John Hartnell. But in just a moment, it's animal health, prevention and cure. Winter feeding, I guess it's not all that safe if you don't do the rules right.
That's right. There's potential, let's put it that way, there's potential for some grave issues to rear their heads if things aren't picked up when they should be, Rob. And I guess the number one thing to talk about at the moment is nitrate poisoning. It's definitely a risk area right now, risk time of year, and I guess the reason for that is that when we have periods of lower growth rate in the plant, for instance low light levels, as you know, the day length starting to drop away, and overcast weather, you know, these southerly weather systems coming through, and drought systems as well. So we've still got issues up in North Canterbury at the moment. So when the plant gets under a bit of growth stress, it tends to accumulate nitrates from the soil, and then we get a bit of a growth spurt, and we have very high concentrations of nitrate left in both leaf and stem of plants. And so brassicas are a classic for this, but we also see the problem in ryegrass and plants such as that as well. Symptoms, typically what happens is these nitrates, they muck up the chemistry of the hemoglobin that carries oxygen around the body, and so the symptoms are rather like asphyxia actually. So we have animals that are blowing a lot, very lethargic, can't be moved without really feeling the pinch and blowing, and as the disease progresses, of course, they go down and they can die actually. So important to pick up on those things. Valuable animals can be salvaged with medications, but the best thing is to pick up on the early symptoms and know if you're feeding risky crops. So testing crops.
You can actually test the leaf to see, can't
Absolutely,
you?
leaf and stem. So you can submit a crop sample, just a handful torn from the area that's being fed, and the local veterinary clinic should be able to test that for you to determine nitrate levels and a risk factor. One of the
clues, I think, is the purple colour rather than the green. Is that right?
Can be, yes. In brassica crops, it can sort of have a purpling that may alert us to some high nitrate levels. If we got it getting risky crops, it doesn't mean it's a waste. You know, it can be fed, but it needs to be managed correctly, and so that's when you need to, especially with cattle, make sure they're going onto a break with some gut fill, so they're not going to gorge themselves. Absolutely, and maybe break feeding, and being a little bit more astute on how much access they're getting, and controlled access to the crop is quite important, and can be life saving for the animal and money saving for the farmer, of course.
Tell me about redwater.
Redwater we don't see a lot these days. It was another typical brassica disease. The more modern cultivars are less risky, but I guess the risk is still around, and there are still cultivars of brassicas around that still have this problem. It was caused through high levels of a chemical agent in the plant that causes the red blood cells to break down, to burst, if you like, and the hemoglobin that's contained within those red blood cells, it passes through into the urine, and so the classic sign is redwater, is a ready urine, and the symptoms as the disease progresses is actually rather identical to nitrate poisoning. Again, we're getting no oxygen carrying capacity in the blood, and so the symptoms are similar. So it's something to be aware of, and if those sort of symptoms are seen, then of course, you know, put 2 and 2 together and contact your veterinary surgeon. But yeah, I think it's something to be held in mind if there's brassicas being fed, and you know, quite important again for winter feeding to have that in the back of one's mind, particularly if you see the symptoms of redwater. Of course, there's other causes of redwater, leptospirosis and whatnot, but if they're on winter feed crops and you're seeing these symptoms, then it's one thing.
It's a bit of a clue, isn't it?
Yeah.
So small breaks and full guts full of straw or hay.
Yep, and quantify risks. So test crop. If you're worried, it's a cheap insurance. Just get the crop or the pasture checked if you're worried. If you've had a pretty slow growth time frame with the plant, and then all of a sudden you've had a bit of a spurt, then definitely I think they're the risk periods, and get the feed tested.
Nick, do we still have problems with listeria?
We do actually. Traditionally, listeria was a problem seen with poorly preserved silage. Somehow the issues, the environment in a poorly preserved silage stack, if the pH wasn't low enough, we could get conducive environment for listerial bugs to grow and grow and grow. And so that was traditionally the concern, and again, of course, because of supplemental feeding with silage, it's a winter problem. The typical symptoms were neurological, so it was called circling disease actually. It often would affect the one side of the face. It would get in through the gum and the animal would just circle and circle, and we still do see those symptoms. But more commonly these days we're starting to see what's called enteric listeriosis, which causes diarrhoea, and much more common these days in sheep. And we're seeing that particularly when sheep are grazing in kind of moist areas with lots of decaying matter, in particular perhaps under or around pine plantations and
okay, because of the needles and stuff.
Exactly.
And any trash, I guess, that's died and has gone down because the grass is very short, even though it's green.
That's
picking
right.
that up.
Yeah, and so I think obviously those environmental issues around that those areas of ground are conducive to listerial overgrowth. And yeah, so there has been many documented cases of enteric listeria where we've had deaths. But yeah, we still do see the neurological cause. It's a bit of a sporadic problem, but it can alert one to the fact that maybe the quality of silage supplementation isn't quite as
Can you test it?
Should be. You can't really. I guess you could culture it, but I guess it's a bit of a non-efficient use of resources. It's, as I said, it's usually a sporadic disease, and I think it's just a good lesson in maintaining feed quality, really. And so, good silage preservation. You know, I guess it's. Yeah, I think in this day and age, people should know what they're doing if they're feeding silage.
Yes, fair enough. Now, goiter I've always thought of as a human disease.
Yeah, so goiter, again, related to generally feeding of tuber crops. So often see it with swede and turnip feeding and things like this. A lot of these crops contain compounds in them that bind up the iodine and make it less available. So it's not that they're deficient in iodine per se, but they just make the iodine much less available. And it's particularly a problem in the winter because when we're feeding pregnant stock, particularly sheep, but the number one animal that gets these problems are goats, actually well above everything else.
Really?
And then what happens is because we've got a poor iodine availability during the pregnancy, we get weak, sickly animals born, and they often do have goiter. They have large thyroid glands, just like some of us remember looking at the old pictures before the days of iodized salt and people getting goiter, and it's exactly the same symptoms, except we see it in newborn animals, lambs and kid goats in particular. And that is a major risk factor associated with winter feeding of tuber crops, and can be prevented with supplementation. So either oral supplementation with regular drenches or a depot injection to supplement the iodine. So,
Nick, thank you very much indeed. So it's not as safe as you may have thought, but you can catch up. If you missed a couple of bits, you can catch it up on our website, which is on theland.co.nz. In just a moment, though, we're talking bull sales. Bull sale season, it's pretty early yet, but how's it looking?
Well, there's been a few sales already, and they've gone all right. Probably the expectations. It's been a trying season, as you know. In a lot of areas it's still quite tight, but the guys have done a great job. The bulls are in good nick, and there's been good galleries. People probably choosy, picking through the catalogue and picking on the bulls they want, and maybe and sticking to that. So there's been a few past, but there's certainly been some good sales as well with good averages, good clearances.
So any particular breeds?
Oh, well, we've recently had a few scimitar sales down south, and they've gone very well. They've got good clearances, and we're now moving probably more into the Hereford sales. There's a week of them coming up in through Otago this week. There's a few Angus sales that are starting to happen, and they've actually gone quite well as well. And as it progresses the next month, there's of course the Angus sales right through to Canterbury and then into the North Island. And historically, they've always got stronger as time's gone on, and exceeded expectations, I guess is the way to put it. Yeah.
So it bodes pretty well for the season.
Well, it does, and it's been a strong calf market. It's been really strong. There's a lot of positive talk in the beef industry. So yeah, it does bodes for good sales. It's just probably it's more a thing of there's been the areas where there's been there has been a few cows killed, so it would be numbers. So I guess it's just maths. There's so many bulls to sell, and there's so many cows. So there may be a bit of excess, but we haven't seen huge amount of passed-in bulls yet telling us that.
And I guess quality is an important thing because people will buy quality bulls.
Well, they can. I mean, that's what they look at it, I think. I don't think money's an issue. Guys are going to sales. They're choosing the better bulls in the catalogue and having the confidence to have a go at them. And if they're missing out, they're figuring, well, there's another sale. There's a wee bit of that. And the quality is there. And one thing has impressed me is the standard of the bulls. A lot of these guys have had a trying time lately. And there's some areas that are still very trying and through Canterbury. And these guys have done an excellent job of bringing these bulls forward. And congratulations to them, really. Yeah.
How does the National Bull Sale fit in? Is that sort of a flag for the whole season that comes after that?
Well, it's the start of the season, and it's supposed to be the flagship of the breeds. And certainly this year the Angus and Hereford breeds had great sales and it got well supported. But in saying that, there were still bulls there, quality bulls you could buy at reasonable money. So there was quite a commercial element there. There's commercial people going to the National and buying these bulls that don't end up being stud bulls, which is great because you get a crowd and it's good to see. Do
you feel the industry's in good heart?
Oh, the beef industry certainly, yeah, and it's positive. People are positive about it, and I think it is. It's looking good for the next wee while and the rest of this bull sale season.
And it's a pretty busy time for you this time of year.
Oh, it is, and there's plenty of sales, and there's more than one every day in some areas, so we don't get to them all, but it's a busy time for agents, and I think a lot of agents find it's a great time they can get their clients in a car and get away to a bull sale for a day and spend a day maybe having a cup of tea and something to eat and picking their bulls and get to know them a bit better. So it's actually good at this time of year, and a lot of them need that probably break from the farm, to be fair, in some of these areas and through Canterbury where it's still very dry. So going away to a bull sale with the agent and spending a bit of time buying a bull is probably not a bad thing.
And that is excellent news. After the break, we're talking horticulture with Jim Grierson.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
Well, Jim, we wanted some cold weather, and gosh, we've got it.
We certainly have, and I know that the urban people may not think it's very, very nice. But
the skiers are right behind you.
Oh, they are, absolutely, and a lot of them are urban. But look, this is what we really do need to shut those plants down, shut the trees and the shrubs and all those things down, so we get a good cold winter, and we come into a very good even breakout in the springtime. So roll on these cold days.
Now, you talked about the fact that some of the plants were thinking it was spring already. What's that going to do to them?
Well, what happens now, there were some that were actually breaking bud. They will burn those buds off, and there could be a negative effect on production, a few %, but they'll shut down now and they'll act normally now. They'll go through their normal dormant winter process.
So that hibernation, for the want of a better term, is actually giving them the strength to come through next summer?
It is. They're really drawing on the carbohydrates that are left in the plant itself, or the tree itself, down into their roots. They want to keep them to the reserves, and when they come into the springtime and the soil temperatures start to move up, the root hairs pick up the nutrients, and they start to put the energy back into the tree or the shrub or bush or whatever it may be, vine, in the time that's needed, which is sort of September, October time. So we need this drawing down now with the cold weather to get all those nice nutrients in the right place for them to bring back up to the buds in the springtime.
Now, speaking of that, I'm thinking of Californian thistles, because they do the same thing. That leads me on to herbicides very briefly. Should we be hitting herbicides now? Yeah,
now we've got the cooler temperatures. This is the time. The ground conditions are still good. I mean, we've had a bit of moisture, which we've desperately needed in a lot of parts of New Zealand, but the ground conditions are still good to get machinery on, and there's enough moisture now in the soil particles, which is say down by 25 millimetres or thereabouts, to make those herbicides really maximise the opportunity of killing off whatever we're spraying. So it's a good combination now. We're in the right zone in terms of getting good, slow but effective kills into the harder to kill weeds, such as your good old Californian thistle.
And there'll be some tough nuts who'll be itching with their secateurs to get into the pruning.
Absolutely. This is the time of the year where the gangs have all started to be assembled from maybe island people, maybe local people, and they're starting to get those gangs sorted out. They really do look after these people. They house them. They make sure they keep away from alcohol, because sometimes the islanders are a bit affected by that, and they have their churches if they require church on a Sunday, and they really bring them into our community so they can take and this is the objective of taking some monies and funds back to their families, back to the islands. So there's a lot of good situations in that situation. Hawke's Bay, Nelson have got some big gangs, Marlborough with the grapes. If we didn't have these people, we just wouldn't have enough people to get out there and do the pruning that's got to be done. So it's a pretty important role. And of course, there are also the good old hardy New Zealanders who go out there on an annual basis and are experienced pruners. They're invaluable, and they're mainly female. And they'll go out there between 9 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon if they've got children, and work in pretty blooming cold conditions.
Yeah, I wouldn't be out there.
but they train these people, and they work beside them, and that actually is really good. It's good to see, and it's not easy work. It can be quite physical at times.
And there's a whole lot of different systems now. You used to just have the 2 leaders coming out. Now you're looking at 4, and there's all sorts of
there's what we call, whether it be an apple tree or a vine or a kiwi fruit, there's what we call the main cuts. So usually the more experienced pruners will go through and do a main cut first, and then along will come the stronger, generally female males, and they'll pull that surplus wood and timber out of a tree or out of a vine, for instance, and then come along the detailed pruning, which takes a little bit longer. But if you get the main cuts done, you can go back a month later or 2 months later and do the detailed pruning. Now in apple trees, the detailed pruning requires removing summer shoots that are going to be in the road for next year's production, and also taking off buds that are facing the wrong way. Now this is where real experience comes into it, and you've got to make sure that you're doing that correctly, so you're addressing the fruit where it's going to be in the tree and where it's going to capture the most sunlight and the most energy to produce nice fruit.
Because sun and air must be important.
Very, very important. One of the things you do with a grapevine or an apple tree or a kiwi fruit, you've got to open the actual plant up to allow that sunlight and air to minimise disease and maximise energy going into the fruits as they grow and develop, and the flowering time and what have you. So it's not just a case of looking at a tree and go, oh yeah, I'll give it a haircut. You've actually got to look at it at a reasonable. A professional, once they get their eye in, they can go into a vine and do 3 vines in 3 or 4 minutes, but they know where they have to make those cuts, and that's quite vital. And it takes a number of years to get that sort of experience. So the farmers and growers, they look after these people because they're invaluable.
And I've seen you with black currants going through the middle of a row.
Yeah, that's right.
Taking the heart of it out.
Yep, that's mechanically pruned, called centre pruning, and that does the same thing as and the same effect, on the bush itself. It's quite dense in there. We need to have air around in there, otherwise we'll get botrytis, and we need to have sunlight getting in there, developing the buds for the following year. So bud development in most fruit trees and bushes and shrubs and raspberries and things like that, blackcurrants, they develop around about November, start their development for the next year's production in November of this year. So,
And when are you harvesting?
well, you're harvesting in January, but they are already initiating the buds for the following year because of the sunlight through the summer. So they're actually working about 14 months ahead of themselves. So, and the pruning is actually, you're looking at a vine. For instance, a vine's a good example because a pruner may revisit that vine row for 5 years, and he or she will see how that vine's developing. And they're making cuts that are going to actually incur production 18 months later, not just tomorrow, but up to 18 months later. They're really looking ahead. They're seeing that the head of the vine is starting to raise towards the wire. Now they've got to keep that head down so they can lay the canes down properly. So they might make a hard cut on that head this year, and putting out 2 canes normally, but the following year that head is in its right position for that year, which is actually 18 to 24 months later.
So you're really planning ahead.
Absolutely, and of course when you do take big cuts, you leave quite a wound, and some of them can be as big as your wrist, and some of them can be as big as your thumb, and they need to be protected. And we immediately dab a fungicide compound. It's usually a thick sort of a compound like thick paint on those wounds, and that absorbs into that wound and actually helps them to seal off and callus, so disease and viruses don't get into those wounds. So there's a lot to pruning and a lot more than meets the eye.
I would say, Jim, thank you very much. It's very enlightening. In just a moment, we'll be enlightened by Brent Rawstron. Start off really with your season. It's been a good one.
Yes, very good. We always get reasonable amounts of rain in here anyway, so that's not the end of the world. Cattle were absolutely brilliant. I've never ever seen prices like we've got this year for cattle. The bull beef just went incredibly well for us. And the vineyard industry, it's ticked along pretty well. Marlborough, we're about 90% of our 10-year average, which, okay, is probably on the lighter side for what our market demands are. But relative to what most people got in Marlborough, we can only say we're very happy. Good quality fruit, in fact probably very much 2013 type vintage, so nice passion fruit flavours to the Sauvignon Blanc, which we're really happy with. It's one that was very successful for us. Down here, probably the best crop of Pinot we've ever had, and certainly the best quality. High 23s of sugar level into the 24s, really ripe, very small berries, and just a lot of raisining. Great fruit, it was cool.
There's been a suggestion that the wine levels are going to be lower this year?
Oh, definitely so. 2013 we were short, 2014 we had the biggest harvest ever in New Zealand, 2015 back to less than, or certainly towards the 2013 vintage, certainly less than average. So yes, there was a lot of carryover from 14, which will disappear now because the market demand really is more than we would have got in 15 on its own. So the price immediately lifted. I was a little unsure why the price for the 14 didn't lift before harvest, because there certainly was every indication there was not going to be enough fruit around at 15. People were a little slow reacting to it. Instead of running sort of, well, let's run 14 just a little bit longer. They sort of hadn't been buying 14 all season, and it was very low prices. Then all of a sudden it slipped probably $1.50 a litre, and we're up to sort of $3, nearly $4 a litre for the 14, and 15 is very strong, $4 now, just because there's so little of it about.
What about the effect of the world affairs with Putin and all that sort of thing going on?
The world's love of Sauvignon Blanc hasn't stopped, and America's love of Sauvignon Blanc is growing. And it's a huge market in the United States. It's certainly looking to be our strongest market worldwide. The UK is always going to be dominated by the five big supermarket giants, and they set the price. So they sort of 80% of the wine is sold to them, and 90% of the wine sold in supermarkets are sold on special. So it really is a chase down to the bottom on that. We're less impressed with the UK market year by year, and spending far more of our time and effort and energy into the United States. 400 million people, growing economy again, certainly long way past their downturn of the 2008, 2009, that's long behind most people over there. And we were seeing it definitely in the restaurants. The cheap end of the market is being replaced by the family restaurant. Those have gone up probably $5 a head spending in terms of the style of restaurants they're going to now. and more of those are going to tap pour type wines, limited bottle sales, but everything's on tap. 8, 10, 12 wines on tap on the big chains, and that really is driving the market along, and a lot of it's really by glass pour.
How do you get wine on tap?
In New Zealand it's done with exchange kegs, very much like beer. You exchange a 20-litre keg, and that gets filled, comes up and is pressurised by nitrogen to push it through the tapping system or on a bar, like very much like your beer is. In the United States they've developed a slightly more sophisticated form, which is a plastic bag, like very much a BIB, a bag and box type plastic bag, 9 litres in volume, and that goes into a keg and is pressed by a diaphragm of rubber, and they just use compressed air to push against the other side of the rubber, and that forces the wine out as it's required, so there's no other gas gets used to expel the wine out of the system, and therefore the wine is poured by tap. And it's probably growing to the stage where a lot of people are liking a lot of different wines, and so you can go to a table with 6, 8, 10 people at a party and everyone have a different wine. Whereas before there was the argument of what bottle of wine do we want to have and then we'll share it. Now everyone buys wine by the glass, and it's just cool. And so they can pour a glass and know that the next 20 odd glasses will taste just the same, because the wine is being expelled without any contact to air.
Do you think we're going to get that sort of thing starting to creep in here in New Zealand?
There's a little bit of keg wine in New Zealand. A lot of the bars will run a keg of Sauvignon Blanc and probably a keg of a red. It is cheaper than the bottle product for the hospitality industry that's serving it, and probably a better product because of the fact there's no air exposure after you've taken a glass out, 2 glasses, 3 glasses, 4 glasses, that sort of style. So there's certainly a savings to the hospitality, the bar owner, to run that. But you do need an establishment that turns over a lot of wine. So bars, bistros work with very, very well. Fine dining restaurants, it's not quite the scene.
And I guess you're just living with the dollar at the moment.
Yeah, I don't buy forward, never have. We try and look at what the world scene is. We've done very well in the last 12 months of chasing it down. A little bit of a blip upwards at the moment because the Fed can't make up its mind whether it wants to increase the interest rates or not. And I think the jury's definitely out on that, whether they'll make an announcement in the foreseeable future, and how that announcement will be, whether it'll be sort of dovish that, oh no, we're not going to be raising interest rates for a wee while yet, or a little bit more bullish that we think we're within sort of 1 or 2 cycles of raising it. I think of more concern is the lack of taking seriously the high New Zealand dollar relative to its GDP spend, etc., etc., etc. I think we are overvalued, and our interest rate is just too high, and the gap between us and the US OCR rate is gaining all the time.
So we are looking a bit closer to Australia now.
In parity, yes, but the interest rate is ridiculous. Well, what's Australia's OCR? 2.25, and we are 3.75. 3.5. So there's a gap between, and so consequently money that can be purchased around the world, borrowed around the world for 0.5%, finds its way quickly to New Zealand because they can get 3.5%. Just as simple as that. And that's, the dollar is driven not by trade, but just purely overseas speculation on interest rates.
An absolute font of knowledge and experience is Brent Rawster. And after the break, we're going to be talking about a book on the wheat industry and catch up with Tim Wilding from Tamadia.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking. Think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking. Think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
Get you thinking. Think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
Flour milling in New Zealand. Garth, you had a bit to do with this. You were the instigator.
Well, it was part of the team and the committee, but yet definitely, and to get it off the ground and support the team as they work through this marvellous piece of work.
Why a book with the history of flour milling in New Zealand?
Well, our core reason was that we were going to lose our history. It's a long, aged milling industry. There's some really, really good people within that industry that are, well, I dare say, getting on in life. And we wanted to capture not only what they'd done, but the passion in the book. And you had to really do it while they were still here. And we wanted to have something written down for the future, that the good things we do, we don't repeat them and do bad things. So
you learn from your history.
We do, and without it documented, we wouldn't do that. And there's nothing really that's documented for the flour milling industry in New Zealand as today.
I mean, it goes right back to the very start, doesn't it? I mean, you had people growing wheat as soon as they arrived in New Zealand and wooden stones to grind it.
Yeah, I mean, stone milling was the first introduction to milling flour, and wholemeal flour it was in those days. And then we've got the modern technology mills that we have today.
Which are all absolutely astounding. There's just millions of dollars tied up.
They are, and we've seen, as you would read in the book, is through the stages. We've had a deregulation period where we had many mills sitting at close farm locations throughout the whole of New Zealand, and then as competitiveness hit New Zealand, we had to rationalise the industry, and now we've probably got a handful, 6 flour mills operating in New Zealand alone, where there might have been 30 or 40.
Including a very new one down in Timaru, the Farmers Mill. That's an interesting concept, Garth.
Yes, I mean, as long as I've been in the industry for 45 years, and it's cyclical, and we've seen mills come and go, and this, we just see another cycle happening, and it's interesting, and I think it's good for the industry too.
Now, as far as the history is concerned, I mean, it's been a bit interesting. The deregulation in '87.
Yeah, so I think the key thing here, differently from globally, in deregulation in 1987, the government decided to deregulate the grain industry and the flour industry. And if we look around the globe, that is done separately. It's either been the wheat industry or the flour industry at separate times. So for New Zealand, it was an extremely big challenge. But I think we stepped up to the mark, and New Zealand did really well, and that's why we're still here today. But I think this book, getting back to the book, we wanted to document how we managed that, how we handled it, so we're going to be in good shape for this industry to be here for a long time yet.
Yeah, well, you know, we're always going to be eating bread, and of course there's a whole lot of new ones.
Yeah.
You've got the farmers saying that they never get paid enough, and you've got your millers saying they're being paid far too much, and it's never the twain.
Oh, and but it never is, and it's so exciting, and even to this day we see that change rapidly, and people ask me as a miller, and I put my miller's hat on, what's your biggest opposition? And today the answer is the dairy industry, and that is something.
Why is that? Because of the land?
The land, and dairy cows eat wheat. So now there's a lot more wheat grown in New Zealand for dairy production or milk production than there is for flour milling. So that is our opposition, and we have had to learn how to fit into that crop, that challenge, and how we find our place. So it's ever evolving, and it's been really, really great.
Speaking of evolving, I mean, in the early days of the book, which is absolutely fabulous, and every cropping farmer should have one.
Oh, absolutely.
But you're talking about the Hilgendorfs and all those sort of Ataris and all the basic stuff. Now, if you go into a supermarket, there's 15 different types of bread. Then there's biscuits. So you've got a niche instead of commodity.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's our survival. From the day 1987, I remember it quite well.
I bet you do.
And sitting there and going, how are we going to survive in this new market? We had 2 flowers in those days. It was a white flower and a wholemeal flower. That was it. And as you say, today we've got 30 flowers that we produce. 30 flowers, servicing all types of markets. But today we've even got flowers now that go into products that are exported to Japan and all around the world. So we've had to develop these products, and we're still developing products today to keep us globally competitive. And that's our niche. We've got to be not a commodity producer as such. We've got to bring quality, unique flowers that people can turn into value-add products to sell around the world.
Because you're doing the same sort of thing as malting, aren't you? Because you've got so many different malts now with the different beers.
Yeah.
So it really is exciting. How does somebody like you, who's been around for 45 years, sort of quietly handle all that?
Well, I mean, every day is a new challenge. You get out of bed and there's always something different to do. Some people ask me, how could you ever be in that same job or the same industry for so long? Every day is exciting. And belonging to New Zealand Flower Millers Research Trust, being part of writing this history, but also looking after our survival through the introduction of breeding programs, and that's a lot of our base work is done. Helping the farmers breed new cultivars that are going to be here for the future, yield well and keep the farmers growing wheat in New Zealand and be competitive on the global market.
Do we stir in the subject of Australian wheat coming in or not?
I mean, Australian wheat, I mean, we're a global country, We've got to face up to the fact that if we've got to be as good or equal to, because Australia's on our back door, and yes, that wheat is available. We've just got to be better. And
so the South Island is seen by the South Islanders as the main wheat industry, but North Island had it as well?
Yeah, they did, and I think they found that there was finding their niche where their profit basis, best return on their land goes, and so South Island lent itself to cropping, high yields, less risk, low risk, and why most of the wheat now is in Canterbury, North Canterbury.
So have you got mills in the North Island?
We've got mills in the North Island.
So that they would sort of do more of the imported stuff.
They do use imported wheat.
You send your flour up there.
Yeah, and we send wheat from Canterbury into our North Island mills for specific reasons and specific grades of flour that we produce for.
So we are good friends up there still.
Oh yes, yes we are, and it's important that we stay that way.
So the future really of the wheat industry, it's in good heart.
Of course it is, and yes it is. Probably there's more opportunity than there ever has been before. It's just being very positive and making sure we get our groundwork right and we don't repeat the bad things that we've done.
Very briefly, the book, where do we find it?
So at the moment it's through the website of the New Zealand Flower Millers Association, and they will guide you to where you can purchase it. Yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you, and congratulations on that. In just a moment, we talk to Tim Wilding from Tamania. Tim, Tamania, it's got a huge history as far as your family is concerned.
Yes, no, it was established in 1927 as a wedding present to my grandfather. So, yeah, now we're into the 4th generation of Wildings being involved with the company. We have other shareholders as well, but yeah, it's still on our family property here, and so it's exciting times.
Angus has played a huge part.
Yeah, the Angus breed has played a huge role in our lives really, and we've built the stud up to at one point over 1,000 cows, but now we've consolidated it back down to about 600 cows. We're calving it this year.
Your bull sales are legendary, and you've just done this all up in its lovely rusticness.
Yeah, well, it's always been it's a big, very important day for us, obviously. So we try and obviously host a lot of our clients. They come from all over New Zealand, and so we try and make it a fun day. It's not much fun for me, but it is a good day normally.
Tim, you've had a bit of success at the National Bull Sales.
Yeah, that was a great thrill last week. We were asked by the association to support it, and which we thought was the appropriate thing to do. We've been away from that scene for quite a number of years. But our bull, Tamania Jonah, who is by a homebred sire, Absolute, he took out the champion of champions and also won made the top price, and also won the beef unit weight gain competition. So that was pretty exciting.
What does that mean for somebody like Tamania?
Oh, well, I think it's hopefully people will take note. We've got quite a lot of absolute sons coming up this year in the catalogue, and I think the exciting thing for me was that also I think people are starting to take notice of carcass data, and we've been trying to infuse that into our herd for a long time now, and so also for us to win with Countdown with our branded beef program, to win champion retail brand this in the same week was pretty exciting.
You've had a huge week.
Yeah, no, it's been good, but it's been a lot of work, and it's been building up. So this sale this year will be, I think, our 49th on farm. So next year we'll be looking forward to another excuse to have a party, I guess.
Tell me, how does Farm Pure work?
Well, Farm Pure is basically, we set that up about 7 years ago with Countdown, with a desire to supply just totally traceable, predictable Angus genetics. So basically we source from our suppliers cattle that have hopefully sired by Timonier sires. They're certified as 100% New Zealand Angus, though we don't detect crossbreeds or anything. And we've got, so farmers that meet those specifications actually get reasonably well rewarded by Countdown, and it's marketed and branded as a premium product.
Which it is.
Yeah, absolutely. This year to win that prestigious award, it's been pretty good. I felt really good for Countdown to do that. I mean, over the years we've often had 3 of the 4 in the finals and never quite made it, but this year we did it. It was great.
And I guess, Tim, this is about as dry as it'll ever get.
Yeah, that's right. They're saying it's the driest in 100 years as far as our rainfall records go. When you come into Timoni, we've got a bit of irrigation in the front. It all looks pretty good, but yeah, that's only 10% of the property, so it's going to be quite a trying winter, but we'll get there. That's what Angus cows are designed to sort of take the highs and the lows.
You've got your young stock on the feedlot.
Yeah, we've adopted a policy of early weaning now and setting them up with rumen development by feeding them hay. So we're always going to put them on the feed pad for maybe 6 weeks to make that transition. Unfortunately, we haven't had any rain for the last 6 months practically, so the calves can't go onto autumn pasture, so we've just kept them there, which has been quite a costly process, but in saying that, it's also a great way to monitor they're all fed evenly, and so we can monitor their weight gains and what the different sires are doing. So it's actually a lot more accurate way to check or predict our genetics and things.
And you're diversifying?
Yeah, a little bit of diversification going on. Well, it'll have to happen at some stage. We're just looking at the options. With both the boys pretty keen on farming, that's always a dilemma. I spent my life trying to talk them out of farming, but that sort of should have used reverse psychology, because they're both pretty keen on it, which is actually, it's great. And it's good to have the next generation back thinking outside the square, adopting technology, digital transfer of all the weights and the records and things like that. It is pretty good, and they're certainly challenging my inputs or the way we used to do things.
Talking about the sale on June the 17th, you're pretty happy with your lineup?
Yeah, no, we're pretty thrilled with the bulls we got this year. We started with 392 bulls to select from, and we've catalogued 120. So, yeah, they've had a fairly vigorous selection and culling regime put over them. So, yeah, they came through. They've come through the dry adequately, and we've never tried to have big, fat, heavy bulls at the sale. So they won't be that, but they'll be well numbered cattle with good muscle.
And Tim, your cattle do shift well. You're talking about losing some of your herd to Erewhon, and that's tough old country up there. Yeah,
that was. We decided we'd just have a bit of a reduction on the herd, so we went from we culled out about 400 cows, which is actually a pretty good thing to be able to do. Still got 600 left. And so we just had a big tidy up, and I was just talking to Mel, the manager up at Erewhon the other day, and that country's 3,000 feet up. It's actually higher than a lot of the Molesworth. And he said that the calves up there off the cows had weaned the heaviest they'd ever had, so that was quite thrilling to know that the cows actually can shift into those environments. We've always known that, but sometimes there's a lot of myth and speculation that they don't. But it's
nice to have it confirmed, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And believe me, that sale on the 17th is an event on its own. After the break, we're talking bees with Federated Farmers.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
Think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
Now, the bee industry, John, is getting pretty close to being unified.
Well, we have a wonderful expectation that by the end of our conference, which is in June in Taupo, that the industry will be giving us the green light to move forward and go through the final process of bringing the industry under one industry entity.
So who are the groups at the moment that you're trying to bring together around a table?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, the biggest group is the ones that actually belong to nothing or nobody, or no industry groups. So they're the serious, large group of unwashed out there that we haven't yet been able to bring into an industry group. Obviously, we've got Federated Farmers and the National Beekeepers Association, and we have the Honey Packers and Exporters Association. So those three groups have been working together with an industry working group since September last year, and we've progressed that through to this point, and within the next week the communication, which I've showed you just this morning, will be heading out to all beekeepers and all industry players right across all sectors to bring them up to date with where we're at.
So the amateur that's got 2 or 3 hives in the backyard and are doing the neighbours' sort of apple trees a favour. Are you looking for them as well?
Absolutely. So our numbers now are almost at 5,700 beekeepers in New Zealand, and in the last 12 months over 790 new entrants, and of those new entrants a very large proportion are sitting in that hobbyist sector, so they play a very important role. We expect, I think by December, that we'll have 6,000 beekeepers and over 600,000 hives in the country, and so that's a big number. And there's a lot of education and a lot of communication that we need to do to all these new entrants to bring them up to speed of the requirements of our industry and disease control and all the other things that are out there.
I think you've answered my next question actually, because I was going to say, what's in it for the person with 2 or 3 hives in the backyard?
Yeah. So that's really what it's about. It's about education. It's about knowing what is right and what is wrong. You know, we're handling a food product. People consume it, and we need to be doing everything right to ensure that we maintain the standards and the really high respect that honey has as a food product around the world.
Are these hobbyists, because that's one of the groups that you're after, are they using that for themselves and just providing a few friends, or can they put it into the mainstream?
Interesting, because I've just done that exercise the other day, and we have, I think, something like the number's about just under 5,000 hobbyist beekeepers in New Zealand.
Really?
And they own about 25,000 hives. So if we took a conservative estimate and said that each hive produces 15 kilos of honey, and the average household at absolute best probably consumes 10 kilos of honey, and if a beekeeper's got more than one hive, which is exactly what it shows, the reality is that they're producing, I guess, over 500,000 kilos a year, more than they could consume in their own homes. so they can give some of it away, I guess.
I guess, well, that would be one of the things,
Yeah,
wouldn't it? I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
It's a case of, you know, all the aunts and uncles and,
Yep.
and everybody that you know, the cousins, the neighbours, all
Correct.
get some honey,
Correct.
which in reality is kicking you professionals right in the teeth.
Maybe, but I mean, for us today, we don't have enough product to meet our export demand. So
okay.
it doesn't have that impact. Had it been back in the mid-80s, that would have been the opposite, where we were totally reliant on our domestic market and very little product went for export. Then it would have certainly have affected how things operate. But today, with the demand that we have internationally, that's not an issue.
So as an organisation, would you be looking at these hobbyists to contact Airborne or whoever it may be who's exporting?
So what the law says is that if you barter, trade or sell honey, that product has to be processed through a correct food handling premises. So
Right.
part of that education is the awareness that extracting your honey from a couple of hives in your garage, which would have and probably still is the norm, that's probably an unacceptable practice if that product's going into the food chain.
So once again, it comes back to education, because
Correct.
whoever it might be who's exporting needs to come and see me if I have the hives.
Yep. So what we'd be encouraging is that those hobbyist beekeepers that produce a surplus over and above their own ability to consume, that product would be taken to a processing facility for extraction.
Yes, right. This organisation, and it looks as though it's going to happen, they will be looking very closely at the Manuka scandal, for the want of a better term.
Yeah, no, well, I don't know if I'd call it a scandal, but certainly it's an area that we're very, very conscious of as an industry. We need to make sure that our product is true to label and that we don't face any repercussions from our international markets.
So it's quality control, really.
Absolutely, you know, and I mean, what's in the jar needs to be also what's on the label. And so there is a lot of work going in from the Ministry of Primary Industries and the industry associations, and there's a working group, a liaison group that comes together from time to time, and our focus is on making sure that that we do produce standards for our product that can be achieved, and that those standards can be replicated internationally so that we can protect the origin product that we have from New Zealand.
Because you can actually test, as I understand it, to make sure that it is true to label, and 80% if it is Manuka or whatever.
Correct. Yeah, so some of that testing is under review now, because we need to strengthen that. So that's part of the process we're going through right now.
Isn't it interesting? Because people don't think about it. They put the honey on the toast, or they put the honey into their smoothies in the morning or whatever. But as an industry, you're facing a lot of challenges.
Correct. You know, it's our industry's growing up, and because we had a large lifestyle element historically, that's all changing. You know, that lifestyle element's becoming really now quite a serious business. And you know, good beekeepers and with good access to nectar sources and Manuka, etc., they have serious incomes today, and it is a really serious business, and we did need to make sure that we're doing it absolutely right.
But you guys are talking about people planting Manuka.
Correct. Yep. So we already have a large PGB project going on now that's being shared with Convita in the North Island, and yes, they're planting large areas of nectar producing Manuka. And it'll be very interesting to see how that progresses and what that develops into in the future.
Why is the Manuka honey so expensive and so well sought after?
Look, the demand internationally is massive. We can't produce enough product, and with demand comes competition, and we now have countries competing with each other, and of course that helps to leverage up the price from a New Zealand perspective. So it is about demand. It's no different to our red meat. And we're seeing the red meat prices rising because our product's going into China and Asia, which are new markets for us. The same principle applies, and you know, that's why we see other protein sources now becoming more evident in our supermarket range, such as chicken and turkey and white meats and things like that becoming more prevalent.
And very briefly, is Manuka only grown in New Zealand?
No, Australia has a very large range of Manuka plants as well. So no, not at all. It's quite possible that our Manuka plants were blown across from Australia in the northwest winds. I don't know, but many hundreds or millions of years ago. But no, they have a range of Manuka over there, and they also now have to comply with the same food labelling requirements and all the other bits and pieces that are there as the New Zealanders do. So we have a joint food standard.
Great. Level playing ground.
Correct.
We actually like those, John. Thank you very much
me
indeed.
Too.
I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed On the Land, but I will be back the same time next week. Until then.